Hello and welcome to the Creative Academy. I'm Eileen. I'm here today with my colleagues Crystal and Donna, and we're doing what we're calling the red pencil, which is our chance to kind of go over some of the query letters that you guys are working on and give you our feedback. That's a little different than the blue pencil, which is where we're giving feedback on people's initial pages. So we are going to go through the query, and the way that we do this is, in this case, I'm going to read it out loud, and then we're going to sort of chime in with our thoughts and comments and give everyone a chance to sort of know what we're thinking. Are we ready, ladies?
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, today we are going to do a query letter that was done by Scott, and this is actually a revised query letter. So Scott did an initial query letter that we went over in the office hours with me, and he has since revised it. So I'm going to be reading the revised query letter. Dear Mr. Sherman, I am seeking representation for my upper middle grade novel, Jimmy's Dilemma. Given your interest in contemporary social issues and representation of authors such as Becky Albatari, whose books address the challenges of teens fitting in, I thought it would be a great fit. 13-year-old Jimmy is starting high school in a small suburban town, although he'd rather be back in the throes of summer, kicking goblin butt with his steadfast friend, Stefan. Awkward and naive, Jimmy desperately wants to fit in, or at least go unnoticed. That is, until he can get back to his role-playing fantasy game. Things don't go as planned. Jimmy quickly ends up being targeted by a bully who's relentless in antagonizing him. Along the way, Jimmy's befriended by a sassy girl with an attitude who's never without her bubblegum, and the only goth boy Jimmy's ever seen. Trying to prove himself, Jimmy joins the football team, and the distance grows between him and his friends. Life doesn't get easier for Jimmy once his hormones and sexual feelings kick in. When it's revealed that Stefan's gay, Jimmy questions his own sexual identity. Stefan becomes the target of the bully and gets beaten up while Jimmy watches. Jimmy must choose between the person he was and the one he's becoming. Readers will identify with Jimmy, not so much as a character to aspire to, but as the person many of us have been. I'm a research professor with over 160 authored, co-authored, published papers, and a 5-page excerpt of Jimmy's Dilemma has been published in the Emerge 17 Writers Studio Anthology. He provides a link. Jimmy's Dilemma is complete at 64,000 words and has been worked on with the YA author-editor, Eileen Cook. A brief synopsis and the first 10 pages are included below. Thank you for your time and consideration. Scott, and then how to reach him, both his Twitter and blog handle. All right, ladies, I think both of you saw the earlier query as well. So I guess just first a question, which do you prefer, this query or the earlier query?
100% this one. This one, I can't even be picky.
Oh, you can, Donna. You're just not trying.
I've tried.
What is it that, is there anything for you that you really liked about this query, or anything that like pulled you into the story or intrigued you with the story?
Yeah, yes. Well, I mean, I guess I'm just putting the two of them up because I marked up the first one and I didn't put a single mark on the second one. They're not even that different from each other, but there's just a bit more of a flow in this one. He talks about the fact that given your interest in social issues and contemporary social issues, which all of a sudden, which frames the story for me in a way that the first query didn't. I'm seeing. Anyway, it's a flow. It's a flow thing. That's all I'm going to say after all those words. And I love the story. The story makes me think of, so you've got these wacky characters, fun teen characters, the girl sounds like fun, goth boy. Anyway, yeah, I like it.
How about you, Crystal?
Yeah, I like it also. I think, again, it's very polished. He's obviously spent a lot of time and effort in nailing down the key components of the story, making sure those are clearly included in here. I like that it shows subtly that he's done his research in terms of who else is being represented by this particular agent. It's obviously not what we call a buckshot approach, where you write one generic letter and then send it to like 25 agents that you think might be interested and just sort of hope for the best. It's specifically targeting an agent and an agency, and very keyed into exactly where this book would fit in the market, which I think is very strong. And I liked how it's put together. I think the flow is fantastic.
It's amazing how much gets in there in such a short amount of time. It's really truly only like there 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 very short paragraphs, like maybe 12 sentences.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of feedback, I have to say, other than nicely done and good job. Definitely this version reads a lot stronger. There's subtle changes, but this one compared to the previous one feels ready to me. Yeah.
I mean, I think one really good thing is important to highlight for everyone, and Donna just mentioned it, the idea that it's very succinct. If you're having a hard time coming up with these, a really good idea is to read a lot of back of the book blurbs or the inside flap, because to some degree, that's what you're trying to do. The entire purpose of a query is just simply to entice the agent to want to read more. That's all you're trying to do. You don't have to fit necessarily everything in. And so I think Scott's done a really nice job here of trimming some stuff up. A couple things I wanted to highlight, again, because I've also seen the first one, is the first query, he had this great line, which I still love, that he wants to be back in the summer kicking goblin butt. I really like it because that's kind of fun little line and that kind of thing. But when we talked about it in office hours, what was interesting is I didn't bump on it at all, but a couple of other people in office hours were like, so is it fantasy? So they're like, he hunts goblins in the summer? And I was like, duh, it's role play. Like it's just because I'm a dork, apparently just like Scott. So all the nerds were like, yeah. And all the non-nerds were like, I don't understand if it's fantasy. So one of the lines that he added, which I thought was great, is awkward and naive. Jimmy desperately wants to fit in or at least go unnoticed. That is at least until he can go back to his role-playing fantasy game. So the initial line actually stopped at least go unnoticed. And there was a stop at that point. So by adding or playing these fantasy role-playing games, for those people who are not nerdies, they will be like, oh, the goblin butt is a nerd thing. Or also just separating it's not video games. And initially I had talked to him about like, what makes Jimmy different, or, you know, what makes him unique? And he was sort of struggling because Jimmy is just sort of kind of the average 13-year-old. But I think adding in the role-playing fantasy games, again, just gives us a little sense of how Jimmy's a little bit different than other 13-year-olds who might be awkward, which is basically the definition of being 13. Those two things go together. I would add just a couple of things because I'm the nitpicky one. So he has a line, trying to prove himself, Jimmy joins the football team and the distance grows between him and his friends. I would add, as he tries to fit in with this new, more popular crowd. So I would just highlight again that to some degree he's having to make the choices. And what I do like is Scott's doing a really nice job of setting up the stakes here. So he can either, like he has this sort of opportunity to become one of the cool kids, you know, on the football team doing all this, but that may mean rejecting his friends. And it's that push-pull that is what the conflict in this story to a large degree is about. So I might add just that little bit. And then the second thing I would add is, because it's the crux of the story, is, you know, Stefan becomes the target of the bully and gets beaten up while Jimmy just watches. This is a critical scene in the book. And again, I've had the opportunity to see this book. So I can sort of comment, like, this is the moment, right? Like his best friend that he's had since they were little kids gets beaten up and he just stands there. And it horrifies him. I just think you can stay there 1 minute longer. So Stefan becomes the target of a bully and gets beaten up while Jimmy just watches. Ashamed at not taking action, but also not wanting to make himself a target, Jimmy ultimately must choose between the person he was and the one he is becoming. So it's just a small little addition, but I think just adds, again, trying to make sure it's really clear when an agent is probably reading hundreds of queries on a Saturday afternoon to clean out their inbox. These are the stakes. Jimmy must choose his friends, or he must choose who he wants to become. So I think that works really well. I didn't check links, but I bet Crystal did because she's like that. But always make sure, again, if you are completing links, that you put those in there and those are correct. But I think this query is ready to hit the road.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Look forward
Any other
to
comments?
hearing how it does.
Yes, hang in there. So that's always the fun part of the process. And by fun, I mean horrible and painful, but it is part of it. So thank you very much to Scott for
Thanks,
this
Scott.
query. Congratulations on the revision. I think it looks great. And for anyone else, if you have a query that you're working on or struggling with, please send it to the red pencil and we will be happy to take a look at it and give you our thoughts. Thanks, everybody.